You are listening to KLRN Radio, where liberty and reason still reign.
Most writers and radio show hosts know that to connect with your fans, you need to do more than just write books or record the latest podcasts. There are many different elements that go into forming an online platform, but there are also many hidden traps. To make matters worse, solid advice on how to survive the muddy waters is scarce. In the book Hidden Traps, I talk about some of the important issues of working with an online platform, highlighting traps that could put your physical or internet security at risk or be harmful to your reputation. Are your social media posts just links with a few disjointed words, making you look like someone who can't complete a sentence? Did your new website cost you more than you anticipated? Are you leaking your personal contact details across the web without even knowing it? Then you need Hidden Traps. Hidden Traps is now available in paperback and ebook from a variety of retailers, including Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and Kobo. Visit blackwolfpublications.com for more details.
Do you need a car? Been shopping only to be turned down because of bad credit, low credit, no credit, bankruptcy, or divorce? Guess what? Today's your lucky day, because now you can buy a car, truck, or SUV, just about any vehicle. It's true. Bad credit doesn't matter. No credit doesn't matter. Bankruptcy or divorce, it just doesn't matter. As a matter of fact, your job is your ticket to your new vehicle. We're Auto Credit Express, and we've helped thousands of people just like you. Antonio H. told us, great company, got me connected, and the day I went in, I drove off in the car I wanted. 100% worth your time. Need a car? Get started now and drive off as early as today. Just text FINANCE, FINANCE, to 357-911 right now to get started. That's FINANCE, FINANCE, to 357-911. Auto financing the easy way. Text FINANCE to 357-911.
KLRN Radio has advertising rates available. We have rates to fit almost any budget. Contact us at advertising@klrnradio.com.
Everyone loves liberty. Our rights come from God, not the government. So why are you letting other people tell you what's best for your health care? Exercise your freedom with Liberty Health Share. Liberty Health Share is a community of people who voluntarily share one another's medical costs. Liberty Health Share is founded on the idea that most people truly want to help one another. Healthcare sharing allows members to do just that as a true community that supports one another in times of need. Liberty believes people should make decisions for themselves and their families. Members are able to take back the freedom to make their own decisions about their health care. Freedom from guilt or doubt about how your money is used. You have the freedom to direct your health care, not to be dictated to by bureaucrats. Stop letting others tell you what to do and join a community of like-minded people. Exercise your freedom. Join Liberty Health Share and take back the control of your health care while helping those around you. Call Liberty at 855-58-LIBERTY. Again, that's 855-58-LIBERTY for more information, or you can check them out at libertyhealthshare.org. Again, that's libertyhealthshare.org.
My son was in the Army back during Desert Storm, but even then he wanted an MBA. He looked at a dozen schools, but only one offered the online education and flexibility he needed while he was in a tent in Iraq. Grantham University. Turns out that Grantham's been delivering affordable, relevant college and advanced degrees for over 65 years. Heck, if they can deliver a quality education to a soldier in a tent overseas, think about the flexibility Grantham can offer you so you can earn your degree too. It doesn't matter how complicated or full your life is. If getting a degree is on your bucket list, you'll want to do what my son did. You'll want to call Grantham. Find out how easy it is to get started on your education so you can check that college degree off your bucket list. Call Grantham right now. 800-910-1370. That's 800-910-1370. Flexible, affordable, relevant. Call 800-910-1370.
At St. Jude, a family never sees a bill at all. It's like the world has been lifted off of your shoulders.
St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. Finding cures. Saving children. Learn more at stjude.org.
Sometimes writers feel lost, unsure why a passage may not be working. It takes another set of eyes to help us nurture our writing into full maturity. At Black Wolf Editorial Services, we strive to enable writers to develop and grow, offering manuscript critiques and line edits through a mentoring editorial style. We also offer assistance on generating a writer's bio for your websites. Black Wolf Editorial Services, nurturing your writing into maturity. For a full list of services, visit blackwolfeditorial.com.
You're listening to the Spark Radio Network, internet radio like you've never heard before. Innovation, creativity, and imagination are all said to begin with a spark. So fasten your seatbelt and take the ride of your life and listen for the spark.
A purple mountain.
Good evening, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us again for immediate release. I'm Bill O'Reilly, and I'm here with my co-host Liz Feld. We hope you all had a wonderful Thanksgiving. Today is Monday, November 26th. I had to look at the calendar for that one. Monday, November 26th, and I can't believe December is right on the doorstep, Liz. Are you already anticipating Christmas stuff, or are you as behind the eight ball as I am?
I'm still recovering from Thursday. Happy Thanksgiving to you, too. I did not have a deep-fried turkey, although that's on my bucket list. You and I can talk about the best place to get a deep-fried turkey.
Right, speaking of buckets,
Popeyes.
Popeyes.
Exactly. I just hate rushing Christmas. I mean, I won't put up any of my Christmas decorations until December 1st. I can't do it. I've got some dead mums on my front porch and some rotted pumpkins, but I do love the fall harvest look. And the fact that Thanksgiving was so early this year and so cold has really thrown me. But I do love this whole season. Between now and obviously January 2nd, we've got a lot to do. A lot of fun things and family things, and also a lot of work at the end of the year.
You're absolutely right, though. It comes too quickly. When my father was little, he said they used to get the Christmas tree on Christmas Eve. That was basically what they did in his Park Slope, Brooklyn neighborhood, and that was the custom. Like now, like I always wait until 10 days out or something to get a Christmas tree, and everything is gone. It's barren. It looks like one of those fields in after World War I in France. I mean, it's just everything is gone. And so apparently people go right from Thanksgiving, at least here in the Northeast where I am, and you are, and they go and grab trees right away. It seems way too early. I agree.
I saw a lot of people driving with trees on the top of their car roofs this weekend. So you're right. And I say to my kids when they get, when are we going to get the tree? I remind them that we're not Bloomingdale's. I'm not trying to sell anything. I'm not in the marketing business. I do it. It's supposed to be, the whole ritual is actually supposed to be done not, with a gun to your head, but really because you have your own little traditions and you set up your night. Sometimes it takes me 3 nights in a row to do it all. You get the candles going, get the music going. I don't know if you do that.
Yeah, we do that. I mean, my thing growing up Catholic, as you did as well, was I'd see that Advent candle there in church. It's 4, 3, 2, 1, and then it was the day. And because they would light a different candle each week until you got to the Christmas candle. And I'd be watching that, from age 3 on. And but now you're right. Everything is it just turns on. They flip a switch, and it's the retailers are taking over. But whatever. That's been long discussed. But it was a good Thanksgiving. It was a good Thanksgiving.
It was, and speaking of retailers, I didn't see any numbers out on how Black Friday worked out, other than some, one headline that said it was a little bit down from last year. But I don't know. And the stock market's been so inconsistent over the last couple of months. Did you see any telltale for how the rest of the holiday season's going to go?
I didn't see it either, other than the stories that you see every year of people slugging it out on the floor of Walmart. But I'm just amazed that so many people still go to the stores. I mean, I'm all online at this point, which is probably a really bad habit, but it's just so much easier. And I mean, I guess if you don't have credit cards, and a lot of people don't have credit cards, they have to go to the retail stores, and so that's just what you have to do. But and I guess today is Cyber Monday, so we'll see how it all works out. I saw a story in the Times, I think, over the weekend, explaining the different theories for how the term Black Friday came about. Did you see that piece?
I did not.
The one, because it was always it was always Black Monday or Black Tuesday or it was always something terrible that happened. There was, revolts in Ireland or in Russia or something. And the theory that I liked the best was that the retailers chose it, they had a different term for, I can't remember what it was originally called, but they settled on Black Friday according to the theory because it was the day that the retailers went from the red into the black. Like all year long, they would lose money, which makes a lot of sense because they make all their money at the end of the year. So it's, I like it. I'm sticking with it. I'm going to propagate that.
I wonder if that could work on a personal level. I'm waiting to turn the corner. I've still got
This could be it. And then there's always the new year, I'm going to be tall and thin and athletic in the new year.
Oh, my God.
Lord.
Well, it's interesting to me that you're an online shopper. I actually go the opposite route. I probably the only person on the planet who does not have an Amazon account. My husband does, and the boxes arrive daily, so don't think that we're living in, in Lancaster, PA, where there's no delivery. But
right.
I like doing the local shopping. I love supporting the local merchants. I'm big on the local bookstores in any town. I just spent last weekend. I took a great drive around Concord, Massachusetts, which has the most beautiful. It's right out of the classic
Courier and Ives.
town.
Yeah.
It's magnificent. And I'm just going store to store, buying chocolates, buying a scarf, buying some decorations, and I worry so much that with the risk that so many of these retailers because they can't afford the rents anymore and they can't compete with all the online shopping are gone, and they're town after town barren, really with with empty storefronts. So I really do my part. I don't think I make anyone make their numbers for the year, but I love to see a thriving downtown.
I try and force myself to go to stores. The trouble is when I walk into a store, especially into a small retail store, I feel this incredible pressure to buy something. Even if they're not pressuring me, I feel so guilty walking in and walking out to the little stores. So to me, if Amazon, it says member cents, and I think I'm 97 or something, or 98. If Amazon enumerated the numbers, I'd be like number 3. As soon as that opened as a bookstore, I was on it. It's funny. I remember reading a story or being told of a story, in those years, 99, 2000, where Jeff Bezos was talking about how they went from a bookseller, to start to selling other things, and the orders were really coming in, and they were losing money for a long time. And Bezos came up with the most amazing. It hit him like a bolt of lightning. The most amazing idea to help run the business better, and it was knee pads. They used to all get on their hands and knees and put things in boxes, and they've come a long way since knee pads. But it's great story. I love the idea of the retailers. I want to be one. I'd love to open a coffee shop or a candy shop, but I find it so. I'm pathetic on the Amazon side, and environmentalists would probably want to shoot me for the amount of cardboard that shows up at my door. But it's just it's so easy because you can look around and not worry that someone's watching you and saying, God, I hope he buys this to make so I can make the
No,
rent
it's
this
true.
month.
You don't feel like you're responsible for making or breaking someone's livelihood. I'm with you on the pressure.
I'm a terrible person.
That's our
Yeah.
Irish guilt. I get it too.
Yeah.
You end up buying things that you absolutely not only don't need, you don't want them, and it can be tough.
I've always wanted a platinum toothpick. I've always wanted that platinum toothpick.
That's what I've always wanted and missed. Well, speaking of Amazon and Jeff Bezos, the backlash against New York State governor for the tax breaks, and the deal he made to get Jeff Bezos and Amazon to commit to putting a second headquarters here or redistribution center, has been enormous. And I guess it's not going away. That's for sure.
It has been. I've got to say, I hate the idea of giving cash grants or even tax breaks, to that matter, to corporations. And I think that's something where people on lots of political sides can agree. The only trouble is that if one state or 49 other states is doing it, you have to do it too to compete. So I would hope that one day the states would get together and make a pact that they're going to stop giving out taxpayer money and these breaks to companies that are doing perfectly well on their own. And they also always benefit the larger companies. The smaller ones or the mid-sized ones don't have the lobbyists. They don't have the financial know-how. They don't have the teams to get these things through. And so it's always the Amazon that comes in. But that said, I wouldn't look a gift horse in the mouth. New York City can't take itself for granted that it's always going to be on top. And, you're talking about upwards of 40,000 jobs in New York City alone with an average salary of $150,000. I mean, and you have people complaining. I think that's crazy. So on this one, I think unless I'd like to see first before finishing my thought, my opinion on this, I'd like to see whether Cuomo got donations, whether anyone in his administration bought land where that happened, whether, donors that were realtors had inside information. Like, you have to run all that stuff down. And that's where government can become so corrupt because of deals like this. But still, it's a lot of jobs. And I think New York is lucky to have them.
Well, yeah, I guess tonight I can agree with all of the above. One thing I would add here, though, and this is axiomatic, but tax breaks were supposed to be for companies that needed incentive to come somewhere, and you also needed incentive to do business and to grow. And Amazon doesn't need any of those, doesn't check any of those boxes for me. They were going to pick New York or Washington if it worked for them, or Boston. But God knows they don't need the incentive. I mean, the whole notion of a tax break is really to incentivize people or organizations that otherwise wouldn't come there. But I completely agree with you on the job creation front for sure. And Long Island City will be a boom for Long Island City. It's not downtown Manhattan. It's an important part of New York that will thrive.
It'll definitely thrive. And you saw some of the executives bought apartments before the announcement was made. Like, that kind of stuff is really bad. But you make a really good larger point, Liz, is that, right, these were the economic development zones, which really came about in the 80s and 90s. And I think a lot of conservative thinking went behind economic development zones initially. It was a way, right, of letting areas that had lost out or were lost to get back on their feet. And, the businesses and the bean counters at these companies did what they're paid to do, is take advantage of every possible loophole and deal out there. And now they take municipalities hostage. And, this Amazon thing was crazy. They announced it, it was a big muckety-muck. When, in Westchester County here where I live, the county executive I worked with at the time, did a huge press conference trying to bring Amazon here. We had a drone bring in his speech to the podium. I mean, those things happened all over the country. We even ran ads in them. We ran economic development ads outside of Amazon's headquarters in Washington State, to try and get their attention. So, and ultimately, where did they go? They went to the areas where there's the best educated workforces in America, which is New York City and Washington D.C. Really, Westchester and Washington D.C., but New York City certainly as well.
I think our guest might have joined. Did you join?
Potentially.
Matt Feld.
Back by popular demand.
I was begging to have you back on, Matthew. Matthew Feld, if everybody remembers, came on just before the elections, the midterm elections on the 6th, and you came on the 5th, the night of the 5th, and gave the most brilliant analysis, which has pretty much come true. Did you get anything wrong from Matthew Feld?
I think I was pretty surprised by the Florida governors and Senate results. Other than that, I think if you were going into the night thinking it was going to be kind of a status quo midterm election, it turned out to be that way. Obviously, there's always the spin afterwards, but Republicans held in states that have become traditionally more Republican, like Missouri and Indiana and North Dakota, and Democrats did particularly well in states that have become more diverse and greater Hispanic population, more African American population, states that used to maybe be safe Republican seats but aren't anymore, like Arizona, Nevada, Texas. So
Orange County, Staten Island.
Orange County, exactly. Places that were Republican strongholds, just like states like Indiana and Missouri, which not too long ago were states that President Obama campaigned in. So it just shows more of kind of the changing realignment that's happening among states in the country more than anything else.
So Matthew, we wanted.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Liz, go ahead. Please go. Go ahead.
Well, I was reading this morning how the three races, the Andrew Gillum race in Florida, the governor's race, and Stacey Abrams in Georgia, and Beto O'Rourke, despite the fact that they did exceedingly well with progressives, white progressives, and also with the African American community, they didn't do well. They certainly didn't come close to Obama's results in rural areas. And I don't know if the Democrats are huddling on that to see how to approach the 2020 with knowing that or what the messaging was. But did you see that? Is that something that you paid any attention to or you heard about before?
Yeah, I don't really buy that too much. I mean, the numbers are true. They did not do well in rural areas. But then again, some people have claimed that it's because, those candidates took too many progressive issues. But when you look at the candidacies of Bill Nelson and Andrew Gillum, they're very starkly different. They both ran as Democrats, but in terms of the issues they prioritized, they were vastly different. And Andrew Gillum did better than Bill Nelson did. From a grand total vote standpoint, obviously the margin was smaller. So, there's very little evidence, in my opinion, or at least not very little, but not a ton of evidence that just those progressive candidates that chose to run away from rural voters did any worse. I mean, Beto O'Rourke obviously got more votes than any Texas Democrats did since 1978. Andrew Gillum and Bill Nelson both lost surprisingly, but I don't think it has much to do with their appeal to rural voters, with just the overall changing sentiment in the state. Republicans are doing much better among Hispanic voters than they did when President Obama was in office. They're doing much better in ex-urban counties around Tallahassee and Miami-Dade and Palm Beach. So, I think it's something that Democrats can certainly be concerned about, but I don't think any Democrat currently is that's jockeying for potentially running in 2020 is debating how they can do better with rural voters. I don't think that's probably a realistic path to victory for Democrats in the future.
I assume that it's how do we target the Midwestern voters, right? The Midwestern Democrats and Independents that cross sides. Is that where the whole game is? And Florida?
Yeah. I mean, I'm a pretty firm believer that in 2020 Pennsylvania will probably swing back to the Democratic Party. They did extremely well there on election night, and the midterms was of course incredibly close in 2016. And I based on the stories that I've read, Democrats feel pretty confidently that they can win back Pennsylvania. I think people were really surprised with how close Scott Walker came once again to winning re-election in Wisconsin, and I'd say that's probably the biggest swing state in the Midwest. Ohio is clearly drifting more towards the Republican column. They had a huge upset in terms of the governor's race on election night, but I think Democrats, someone like Sherrod Brown is probably someone who would have something to say about that. But It's definitely going to be interesting to see whether Democrats target someone that can win Arizona, which is, in my opinion, most certainly a swing state now. They probably feel really confident about if they were to put up a really appealing candidate that could cross party lines, they probably think that it could at least compete in a huge state like Texas, which of course has 38 electoral votes. And so the map is always changing, and it's going to be very interesting to see whether Democrats nominate someone who's more likely to appeal to kind of that Southwest belt that includes Texas, Nevada, New Mexico, Arizona, or if they choose to go with someone who's going to prioritize kind of other issues, someone who's more of an economic populist that can target states like Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. It's going to be it's way too early to tell what type of strategy they're going to choose, and of course they're going to try and find a candidate that can appeal to both bases.
Yeah, or a ticket that can do that, certainly. Liz and I were talking before. We were so happy to have you back on as a representative of your generation, and I realize your generation is not monolithic. There's a lot of different thoughts going on. But, we were talking about, what we would talk about on the show and what we talk about this week and tossing ideas around. And there tends to be so much bad news out there and so many trends that, from our generation's perspective, that are moving in a worrisome direction. And we were saying, well, there has to be some hope for us. There has to be, like, what are the millennials going to do? How are they going to get us out of this? And I don't know the answer. We wanted to talk to you about that a little bit. I've got to say one thing. I had a daughter home from college who went to a very good university, and she had some friends here. And I have another daughter in college now at a very good school. And a third daughter is home. I honest to God, I mean, I pray she's does well enough to go to college. And if she were able to get into the best colleges in America, I'm not sure I'd want to send her to one of them. For real. like I'm for real. Like it's really gotten so bad where the conversations we were having over the weekend, and I hope my eldest daughter doesn't listen to the show, they were so out of touch with the world that I know and I'm out of touch with a larger world than that. And the matters of concern were so identity driven and the rest of it. And I thought, good God, doesn't this generation realize they're going to get slaughtered with debt and reality? What's going on in your age group? Like, what do you fight about in bars? I guess.
Well, I think it's a lot of, to begin with, it's a lot of frustration. I think more than anything, I think young voters have been long searching for candidates that can kind of connect with them, and I think that's what's really appealed them more to the Democratic Party more than ever. Of course, Obama was kind of the first candidate that kind of energized millennials and was able to get them out to vote. And I don't think it's a secret that it's because largely due to his charisma. And I think young voters are urging for candidates they can connect to. You know, Beto O'Rourke in Texas obviously was kind of the classic example, but even Andrew Gillum in Florida. You know, it's no question that Republicans were hoping Marco Rubio was going to be that candidate in 2016. It didn't turn out that way. So I think, to start, I think that's why millennials are starting to kind of gravitate more towards the issues of the Democratic Party platform, whether it be healthcare, climate change, education, student loan forgiveness, because they just feel more connected to those candidates on a personal level. And I think, you know, my mom and I talked about this over at Thanksgiving over the weekend, and, you know, to me, that's the biggest challenge that the Republican Party has is finding a way to connect its message to its voters or to voters in general. But the biggest problem with that is they don't have a lot of people on the bench that can actually do that. I mean, you just can't send out 15, 16, 17-year-olds to go out and kind of connect with those voters. And while the Republicans do have youth, whether it's Tim Scott or Marco Rubio, and they do have energy, they do not do a very good job of nationalizing and promoting those candidates on a full national platform. If you go ask someone in Nevada, they know who Beto O'Rourke is, they have no idea who Tim Scott is. And so to me, the big thing is that it's the thing the party really needs to do is showcase that, A, they care for issues like deficit reduction, which they've kind of struggled with over the last 2 years. They have to show that they, you know, that it's true their platform is something that can help foster more success in terms of Social Security and Medicare and entitlements, and they have not done a good job of that. And so for me, the biggest thing is for Republicans and for conservatives is that they need to find candidates and they need to nationalize the candidates that are most able to connect with those voters. And if they don't, the stark divide amongst millennials in terms of whether they choose to vote for the Democratic candidate or the Republican candidate is just going to continue to grow and grow and grow until it becomes just truly unsustainable for the Republican candidate that's running.
Yeah. I just wonder, like, how does the debt, for example, the overspending and the unwillingness to take on the entitlement issues, how does that mesh with single payer, with other things that are regular conversations on the left? The two are totally incompatible. Like,
right.
Is that understood, or I mean, do you argue that in back rooms or coffee shops?
Well, honestly, I really care about the national debt. I care about the deficit. The problem from that standpoint, though, is that leaders on both parties have chosen not to make that a priority. And it should be a priority. It has to be a priority. But it's been on the back burner. No one talks about it. None of the leaders have talked about it over the last 2 years. Particularly since the Obama administration and the Trump administration, came into office. They've chosen to prioritize other things, which is totally fine. But by taking it off the back burner, people don't really see its importance. And it's incredibly important. We just cannot afford programs that we once were able to. We can't, we're not going to be able to afford Social Security within, 10 years at this rate. It's going to it's going to far exceed our GDP. And so that to me is the problem, is the messaging more than anything else. Young voters are coming in now and they're becoming kind of ingrained into a culture where immigration is the most important issue or education is the most important issue, and that national debt is not an important issue. And it's because the leaders of the parties, both parties across the aisle, have chosen not to make it a front page issue when it has to be.
Yeah. Can I jump in one more time, Liz? One last thought on it. It's just, from the political perspective, and I think this is really a really important thing to talk about because, I think the Republican Party needs the leaders who are willing to disagree with the public and have to be willing to educate the public and to take risk, because right now we're not. And from a political perspective, if you're running a candidate for any office, particularly, but a federal office in particular, you'll often, you'll run 2 or 3 big polls throughout an election. And you'll ask, would you be more or less likely to vote for a candidate who wants to reform Medicaid and Social Security to extend the life of the programs? And it will come back consistently, at least here in New York, 65% against that candidate. So no one touches it. And that's why it's off the table, because if you touch it, you're dead. And to me, you have to touch it, embrace it, hold it, carry it, and change minds. And that's really brave. Like, you need a brave candidate to do that, and we don't seem to have them. Even Chris Christie, who was my least favorite governor because of the way he treated the RGA, even he, though, had the courage, or at least it was a long shot for him, to try talking about debt reduction and entitlement reform in the 2016 election, but he was already so damaged, I don't think he had a chance. But no one's willing to do it. I mean, you see that, Liz, right? I mean, it's so obvious, but no one touches it.
Well, and you're to Christie first, and I'll get to the broader issue. He walked into the governor's mansion back in the early 2000s or mid 2000s and inherited a massive pension problem. I mean, the state of New Jersey was in such bad shape, and he spent the first couple of years digging. I'm sure you remember this well. Digging out from that and.
It's when he was good.
And which when he was excellent. And sometimes gets to what kinds of people do we need to run for president, and someone who's actually been accountable and managed things like, union contracts and pensions and infrastructure projects, multi-billion dollar projects. That stuff matters when you're dealing with, the size of the problems we have right now. And the Congress will not deal with this, which is why I think you need a president who's really been a chief executive, who is willing to stand up and actually put a plan together to solve these problems. Because these members of Congress are just looking at their next election. But, Matthew, we talked the last time you joined us about the top priorities for millennial voters. And I've said, Billy's heard me talk about this a lot, I've often said that your generation, you don't see what the national debt is going to do to you. Because you're on the precipice of getting a Social Security check or Medicare, needing Medicare, to access Medicare. But I thought if we just took, $40,000 per citizen, which is exactly what it is, it might even be more by now, and put a door hanger on every door or sent you a bill every year for $40,000 to pay down the debt, it would make you think long and hard about who to vote for. Who has a deficit reduction plan, who's got a debt reduction plan, who's got a long-term capital plan for the country. But it seems that you can't see it. People don't really understand it. And, immigration is on the front page every day of the paper. We're living and breathing the consequences of not having ever done comprehensive immigration reform and immigration planning. Same thing, but, look at the student loan problems. Students are actually living every single day with the burden of trying to, afford college. But the rest of the stuff, Social Security, Medicare, the debt, they just seem so far away and inconsequential almost, other than just, a headline.
Yeah, I mean, the two parties unfortunately go hand in hand in terms of their responsibility for the debt, and that's really the problem. Democrats keep pushing, for single payer health care. They pull for, free education. They pull for free public education. You kind of name it, free overall. From free health care and from free subsidies, and then Republicans have continued to push, increasing tax cuts and greater spending on the military, which is all well and fine to campaign on, and is a very popular political issue. But when you combine increased taxes with whatever the Democrats want with increased spending, you end up with just an absurd amount of deficits year after year after year, and it's going to take one Republican and one Democrat. Probably it's going to have to be senators because they're 6-year elections to sit down in a back room and hammer out a deal and convince their constituents, their colleagues that it's worth signing on for. And, you can't, I guess you can throw everyone out of office, but you really kind of can't. And so the frustrating thing is just, it's kind of a back burner issue because there's so many other prerogatives in this country to people that can only be solved by spending more money. And it's just this cyclical pattern of, well, we want to improve public education. Well, okay, you can argue for decreasing the size of the Department of Education, but there still needs to be more funding in there somehow. And so that only increases the deficit. You want to, talk about increasing the presence in Crimea to stop Russia's involvement. That's fine. That causes more increases in defense spending. You want to help support the border. That's fine. That's more money towards immigration. And so, you want to help people get health care. That's fine. That's, that's under $1 trillion a year. So the problem is we have, this is unfortunate to say, but we have not handled our matters in the last 30 years, and as a result, it's almost become impossible to handle them now. And so to me, that's the biggest issue is that every day, literally every day that passes by and these programs become more and more expensive, it becomes impossible to stop the debt and the deficit because we're currently in a situation with the amount of people that don't have health care, the amount of people that cannot afford college, that are struggling with student loan forgiveness, that we just cannot afford to make big spending cuts right now, unless you're willing to take a look at the military or entitlement programs.
the president said
go ahead, Liz.
Well, the president, just in the last couple of days, has said he wants to, revisit the idea of focus, deficit reduction and debt reduction. Even though government debt's risen $2 trillion since Trump took office, and he thinks cutting a few $1 billion out of the defense budget is actually going to help. It's not, but he says he wants to do that, and his administration says okay, and then he immediately says, but we're not doing any entitlement reform. And they put all of these sacred cows, which really amount to almost 90% of the national budget. So it's a lot of headlines and a lot of hand wringing, and I don't see a way out of it. Right.
And you
people we have at the table.
Yeah, you definitely need some creative thinking, Matthew. You were making me think of the debt closing or the base closing commission back in the late 80s, early 90s, Liz. Where no one member of Congress wanted to vote to close down his or her military base, so they put together a commission where they could spread the blame, equally around the Congress, and that was successful. But I think that's what Simpson Bowles was supposed to be on the debt, but it just didn't play. Interesting. Again, and I was going to throw on top of the misery and the grief and the angst from this conversation, the interest rates, which will pop, and when they go up, they can go up pretty quickly, very, very quickly, and that's going to make things worse. The William F. Buckley Jr. program at Yale, and I serve on its board, did its first annual kind of ideas competition, which I hope you'll consider entering, Matthew, this year. They did it last year, and there were significant cash prizes for both undergraduate and postgraduate ideas. And it was conservative thinking to try and deal with the issues going forward. I mean, in the 90s, the conservatives and the Republicans were driving the ideas. You had Tommy Thompson from Wisconsin. You had Giuliani up in New York, Manhattan Institute, Jack Kemp. You had a lot of really bright people pushing stuff. And this is an attempt that the program is doing to try and get ideas back out there. And a lot of them were on student debt and were on this types of things. One idea which did not win but got into the finals was to allow people to forego a year of Social Security and Medicaid in order to get 1 year reduction in student loan spending. Like you would make the deal now, so you would retire a year later, and it was a way of saving money in the long term.
That's really creative, yeah.
But there are ways we can get through it if there's a we. And I guess my question to you, Matthew, is there potentially a we among the generations coming up, both yours and the next one?
Yeah, I think so. Yes, and I think there is something there that's I think it's a really interesting plan. It sounds incredibly fascinating because I think the thing that currently people are saying now, at least college students are saying, their economy is not a number one issue, jobs is not a number one issue for them, entitlement reform is a number one issue for them, because how can I even worry about entitlement reform, or how can I even worry about getting a job when I can't even afford to pay for college to get me a job?
Right.
And so, and of course, when jobs are becoming more and more competitive, as looking at the technological and service sector, and widely now more and more jobs are requiring a bachelor or master's degree, it's costing more and more money for kids to pay for a job, pretty much. They're literally paying for a job. They're paying for years and years of education that is, $200,000, $300,000, $400,000, dollars to get an $80,000 a year job. By the time they're 24 and 25 years old, but now they're making income to literally pay off their loans for years and years and years. And so,
of course,
I think that would be met. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm just agreeing with everything you're saying. I wanted to interject that one of the other proposals, if I remember correctly, and I think we're going to have Lauren Noble on at some point, who's she's the executive director of the Buckley program at Yale, and to talk about these. But another idea was to allow the student loan system to float based on your pursuit of studies. And there's some inherent problems in that, but basically if you're pursuing a degree that has a good market value, if you're pursuing it in business or in engineering or in the sciences or in something like that, you would pay a lower rate of interest towards that loan, where if you were studying underwater basket weaving, you pay, although I understand that's now a lucrative market, you would pay a much higher interest rate. And the problem with that is that you put a hit on the arts and on journalism and things like that.
You do, and there's a whole value-based system that could be really offensive to people.
But it's an interesting idea. I mean, if the banks were really giving the loans rather than, because the feds back it up and you can't declare bankruptcy, but if it was a real market rate, that's what would happen. If you're studying engineering, you might pay 3.5%, for 20 years. And if you were studying, some ethereal program, you might be paying 8. But anyway, at least it was interesting thinking. At least it was thinking. You may not go with that idea, but people thinking about it.
Yeah, and I think you can even fool around with changing the rate and kind of increase. Maybe you increase the payroll tax by 1% or something like that that you have to pay, which I'm a huge fan of. That's a different story for another time. But I think that overall, I think that's the biggest thing. I think the number one issue, on top of involved in the healthcare discussion, of course, is just affordable education. And I think that's going to be the biggest struggle, is over how the conservative movement can kind of become more open, more welcoming, and kind of tie in ideas like that to their platform on entitlement reform, and kind of make it more enticing for young voters to go after a solution like that.
Right. And you don't even have to win every idea. It's just you're showing what your values are when you argue for type things like that. I mean, if you get into power, you have to hammer out some kind of deal where it may look a little bit different at the end, but at least you're showing your thinking, you're showing your math. And I think when you're showing your math, you're showing what you care about. And right in that instance, you're showing that you care about students struggling and middle class parents struggling a lot to get by. But the cost is just craziness.
It's crazy, and the thing is, of course, is that there has to be some. You have to figure there has to be some conservative ideologue with a plan. I mean, they've been kind of waiting for this moment since 2010 to unveil their plan that kind of ties healthcare together with students under the 26 and younger, and pretty much their default position is just said they're going to stick the same. They're going to get rid of all the other parts of the healthcare law, but we're going to allow kids to stay on their parents' plan until they're 26, which to me is a bit of a cop out. Because I'm all for it, I obviously favor something like that. But to me, conservatives should by now be able to craft a plan that kind of appeals to younger voters, that say you don't necessarily have to stay on your parents' plan. We actually have Plan B, which helps you generate and helps you get affordable health care tied with your affordable student loans over a 10, 20, 30-year period.
Yeah, savings account or something. Right, exactly. Hey, Liz, just to throw a curveball in here. Liz, what's your take on the border stuff, which is really heating up? Obviously, there was smoke, tear gas fired yesterday, and I'm sure there'll be some more today. How do you see that situation?
Matthew and I were exchanging notes about that this morning. Listen, we and I have talked about the broader issue that we're a nation of laws, and so should we enforce the law as it is, and how do we enforce the law? We're not going to solve this conversation, the broader immigration problem. I think I don't know that frankly that we have much of a choice right now. Do I like seeing tear gas? No. Has it happened? Have we done it in the past? We absolutely have. I mean, it's not as if the United States government hasn't said for the last 3 months, if you, for lack of a more eloquent word, if you rush the border, we're going to stop you. So
yeah.
This is not the reaction of the U.S. troops and the president is not a surprise. It shouldn't be a surprise to anybody. Is it going to ramp up the feud? Yeah, I think it will, and I mean the political feud. I'm not saying with the border. I mean, I think people are pleased to see that Mexico is starting to do something. The Mexican government is starting to do something about it. But listen, the president has been very clear, whether people agree with him or not, from day one, long before he was elected, that this is the way he was going to conduct business down at the border. So I don't disagree. I don't like what I see. I don't like the pictures, but I'm not surprised, and I certainly think it's within the right of the government.
Yeah, I mean, I do too. And the reason what made me think about it was I'm looking at a picture on Drudge right now of people breaking through a fence, and it's a worrisome shot, and you see smoke in the air and the rest of it. But when you think about, college costs, like to tie the two conversations together, you can't have an open border and call for a DREAM Act where you're educating, people on the public dime coming across the border and also advocate and also complain about the cost of college. I mean, it's just it all interrelates, and I'm actually you need an E-Verify system first of all. A border wall alone's not going to do it, but I take a pretty hard line on the border stuff. I totally agree with the president on this one. If you have to shut it down, shut it down. There has to be a respect of sovereignty, and that's not a bad thing. That doesn't make you a mean person. It's just common sense.
Well, and now it's going to be roped right into the budget conversation because the president's going to, here we are again. He wants the funding for the wall in the budget. I don't know that he's going to do anything until everyone budgets on that in Congress, and we could end up at a massive stalemate 2 weeks from now.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Where are you on that, Matthew?
Well, I would say that it's a lot of people think the immigration stuff worked in the midterms, and no question didn't helping Defeat McCaskill in Missouri and Joe Donnelly maybe in Indiana, Heidi Heitkamp in North Dakota. But Democrats did their best along the southern border, and to me, I think a lot of Democrats like Kamala Harris and Amy Klobuchar or Sherrod Brown are going to say, if you want an immigration fight, we're all for it because we did terrific along Southwest Texas. We did really well along the border in Arizona. We obviously did much better in Nevada. And so to me, I think Democrats would be welcome to have an immigration fight. Again, I think it's something that unquestionably fires up the conservative base, and I think that as a result, President Trump is going to have to see no reason not to double down on this border wall call. But I think Democrats are more than willing to fight him on the issue, and if it causes a government shutdown, I think that's something that the Democrats in Congress are prepared for. I think that's a battle that they can win overall nationally.
I think they lose on that one. On that one, I'm the other way. I think they lose on that battle, and maybe, and you're right. Democrats did do well along the border states, and I wonder how much that had to do with Trump and maybe other issues. But I think that's a common sense, cut across all party lines issue. To me anyway, I may be wrong, and you very well may be right. But I think the Republicans take that fight any day, and it's interesting. And you may be right. So. We may be looking at a huge fight. Basically, if both sides think there's advantage in it.
I wonder also, Matthew, sorry, your point, let me just ask you a question in this for you. Is your point that those Democrats did well because they disagreed with Trump, or how much of it was that they actually also believe in strong borders? It's the language, the rhetoric, it's the inflammatory, with the ads, it's the inflammatory, speeches that the president gave throughout, especially the last couple of weeks of the campaign, that actually did it. Is it the policy that was that the Democrats succeeded on, or is it really more the approach and the style?
I think it's a little bit of both. I don't think there's any question that a lot of more of the Democratic Party is more open to a DREAM Act than maybe 10, 15, 20 years ago, even in the mid 2000s when George Bush was in office. But I think a huge part of it, you got to remember that, Kyrsten Sinema ran on a comprehensive immigration reform bill, and so to me, the question is maybe I agree. It's a winning issue for Americans that were born here and that were American citizens. I don't disagree with that at all. But I'm talking, but in terms of in states like North Carolina, in Texas, in Arizona, in Nevada, in Colorado, even Virginia, that have changing demographics, that have more and more citizens who, moved here and became citizens, when they were 18, 20, 25 years old. As more and more of those individuals become members of the voting population, I think that's where the Democratic strength lies, if they are able to kind of strike a compassionate tone and maybe reflect some of the similar views, but as you mentioned, kind of reflect it in an easier, calmer fashion where they're more open to other issues such as, work permits and things like that. I think that's something that's going to greatly benefit them. Are they going to lose in states maybe like Florida, in states like Missouri, Indiana, maybe even Wisconsin? Yes, but I think they're going to be willing to forfeit, if they do lose anything, I think they're going to be willing to forfeit that if they're able to turn other states like Arizona and Texas that have been traditionally Republican into their column.
And then you wonder, will both sides have an incentive to keep the fight going, whether they're really going to seek solutions. I mean, E-Verify which is, you put the impetus on employers to check somebody's, card or E-Verify card once the system is set up. It seems like such an obvious solution. And, it's been talked about since 2002, shortly after 9/11. It was all the rage. Everyone talked about the importance of that. And, when things don't happen, there's a reason. And I hope it's not that both sides benefit too much politically from the fight. It may be the case.
Yeah,
really, sorry about Matthew.
No.
Well, I was going to introduce sort of a related topic, which is driver's licenses for illegals. I mean, Billy, you have a lot of experience working on this issue. Going back 10, 15 years. You want to talk about that a little bit and where that fits into any of this?
Well, it's funny that you mentioned that because Matthew just spoke about how Democrats 15 years ago were very different on immigration issues. And I worked on that with a group called the Coalition for Secure Driver's License. And then a bunch of other organizations following, and 9/11 Families for Secure America. And it was following 9/11 and it was clear that the 19 terrorists involved that day, that driver's licenses were absolutely instrumental to their operations, and it allowed them to do so many things. At that point, there was, the license requirements were very, very lax in some states, and you're only as strong as your weakest link state for driver's licenses. For example, you could purchase firearms, you could send money back and forth overseas, and they did. They wired money back and forth. You could enter federal buildings. It's effectively an internal passport in America. And the idea, the groups that I worked with advocated and won what was called the Real ID Act, which was minimum standards for driver's licenses around the country in order to prevent that. And there's a couple of books written on it. I mean, it's amazing. Mohammed Atta was picked up in Florida for driving without a license, and within 2 weeks, the 19 terrorists had like 63 licenses. They realized how important they were and how dangerous they were not to have. You could disappear once you have one. So anyway, so shortly after that, I remember when Eliot Spitzer came into office, I think in 2006 in New York, the Democrats pushed the idea, which was driven by La Raza and a lot of other left-wing organizations, a lot of Soros groups, and they pushed driver's licenses for illegals or undocumented, whatever you want to call, in New York. And Spitzer went out on it, and it destroyed him. It was the first thing that really put a dent into him.
Yes, it did.
And everyone went
a huge campaign issue for Hillary Clinton as well.
For Hillary Clinton, she stumbled on that issue in 2008. In that second debate with President Obama, that question was asked, and she stumbled. She didn't know how to answer it, and it shows you how far the Democratic Party has come. Where now licenses for undocumented immigrants is like standard fare in the party, and it's really becoming an issue in New York again, of all places, which is just madness. The place that lost 3,000 people and two very large towers, and it's had a lot of and I'm not saying that the average person that's coming across the border illegally is a terrorist, but driver's licenses give one an enormous number of rights and powers, and they normalize you. Once you have a driver's license, you are normalized in this country, and so it's something that's coming back. And if you're pushing open borders or something approximating open borders, and then you're pushing the sanctuary cities and the driver's licenses for undocumented people here, you're in real trouble. I mean, you've lost control of your country, and I don't see any way around that. And I think that's just common sense. I don't mean to say it to sound bigoted against any one or number of people. There are a lot of people that are illegal where I live, and I know a lot of them and get along with them, and their kids go to school with my kids. But it's going to be a real problem in the long term. So it's, watch that issue. It's starting to pop up, and I think, the Real ID Act was passed. Actually, Jeff Sessions was the one who really got that moving, but that was passed in 2006, and it just started to roll in New York State, and now there's, a lot of pushback to weaken it. And so it's something to keep an eye on. It's going to be a big issue, I believe, in the 2020 elections and beyond.
Yeah, I think, it's always fun to talk about, people always seem to have these solutions about what to do going forward in terms of the border. But, the fact of the matter is nothing's going to be resolved until the Congress decides what to do with the 11 million illegal immigrants that are already here. Now, the number, believe it or not, obviously had a huge skyrocket in the 2000s and has fallen a little bit over the last 4 to 5 years. Immigrants that currently live here, but until there's any sort of change on how those individuals are handled, the idea that somehow we're going to get up and deport all of them is completely unrealistic. It's incredibly costly.
Yeah, it's not going to happen.
And it's also incredibly dumb. There are a fair amount of those illegal immigrants that that do jobs. Yeah, I know people don't, a lot of people don't like to hear this, but they do jobs that Americans don't want to do. As I told my mom last week, I don't see a lot of Americans begging to be kind of the pickers in California on the farm, and make, $4 an hour, $5 an hour, particularly illegally. And so
not yet anyway.
Yeah, I don't think employers are going to be getting rid of those individuals anytime soon. And I don't see a lot of Americans running to do those jobs either. That's number one. Number two, you kind of mentioned that, the Democrats have certainly swapped on this issue, and they have. I would argue that both parties have kind of flipped on this issue. People like George Bush were much more lenient on issues such as immigration than the current members of the Republican Party are. As
Go back to Reagan.
In 2012, candidates like Newt Gingrich and Mitt Romney both ran on E-Verify stances, and they got slammed by President Obama for it during the general election. It unquestionably, their stances killed them among Hispanic voters in the general election, with their openness towards Jan Brewer's implemented system in Arizona that was eventually struck down by the Supreme Court. And so to me, it's been kind of a back and forth issue. And again, I think 2020, people like to talk about 2016, but I'm very interested to see whether 2016 was a referendum on Hillary Clinton or a celebration of Donald Trump's ideas. And I think 2020 is going to be a real battle test, kind of a test tube on whether, the Republican Party can run on an issue that immigration is at the forefront, because I think it's going to really tell the story of how they kind of decipher what their prerogatives are in terms of politics, not just in 2020, but if they do well, 2022, 2024, and years to come.
It was one of the things that upset me about Trump, the candidate, was that the way he approaches things and that kind of crass style that he uses, it makes issues that are legitimate issues radioactive for Republicans to run on in blue states or in swing states. It's like, he says such outrageous things that if you agree with him on them, you get really badly damaged in your election.
Right.
And I look forward to the day where that's not the case. I don't know whether it's going to be 2 years or 6 years from now.
Yeah, and you talk about issues like undocumented immigration, and again, we can argue ad nauseum whether it's an issue or not, but again, after the midterms, you talked about the birthright citizenship and looking at the Constitution, and it's like, you're going down a road of issues that really people don't want to talk about, they're not interested in, and if you want to really have to talk about what to do with undocumented immigrants, we can, but now you're going to open up a discussion of whether or not you're going after the Constitution or not. Well, that's one heck of a discussion to discuss in the golf administration. So no, I totally agree with you. I think if you had
perfect illustration.
And if you had a leading member of the party who was able to stick on message in terms of we're going to go for E-Verify, then that's something that they should do, or they probably should have done their first 2 years.
Well, Marco Rubio that was Rubio. Maybe Mitt Romney will lead on that, Matthew.
And Giuliani.
And Giuliani. Mitt Romney was big on that when he ran in 2012.
Yeah. You and I had many discussions about Marco Rubio and his vote in 2013 that he decided was politically expedient for himself when he voted against the comprehensive immigration deal that had kind of gone through the subcommittee. And to me, I mean, look, I think it's going to be interesting to see, you figure someone like Jeff Flake would have propped that up, or Paul Ryan, while being Speaker of the House. Somehow the fact to me that something even like that was not even brought to a vote is pretty stunning. I mean, I think you could even have found Democrats like Heidi Heitkamp, Joe Manchin, even Joe Donnelly, Claire McCaskill. You could have found people running in, plenty of Democrats running in Republican seats in 2018 that would have signed on to an E-Verify bill. And the fact that they couldn't do that, or they wouldn't do that, is puzzling, to say the least.
Isn't that crazy? Like, Liz, why do you think they didn't do that?
Because of the man at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. Because that's why Republicans, I think, wouldn't push it. I think, Matthew, I agree with Matthew that the Democrats would have gone for it. It was the perfect time to do it. But I think that because it's what you said, too, Billy, a minute ago, is that even they might agree with Trump. They might actually be in sync with Trump on policy stuff, but because of the way the president talks about all these issues, you can't actually get to the second sentence about what you really want to do, the subject.
Yeah.
And so they just couldn't do it. They didn't want to have the fight with him, even though the truth is he probably would have gone for it. But they just weren't going to bring it up. I think that's where, and it's tragic. And I agree the time was, because it's certainly not going to happen in the next year and a half. It's not going to happen before the 2020. I don't see it happening before the 2020 election.
Yeah, I mean, everything just gets tied together. The issues all get tied together, and it's such a shame. What happened? Like, you could have a little bit of goodwill and pass one as a standalone, and say, we did this one, can you consider this one? Maybe
But I
that's
remember what
happened.
happened to even 18 months ago. When I remember, I think one of the most impressive, encouraging event I ever saw on Capitol Hill was when Dick Durbin and Lindsey Graham got together right on the when the DACA was on the verge of expiring, and they had that press conference. Do you remember this? And they said, we're going to do something about this, and here's what, we're going to put together a 3-point plan. We're going to get back in 30 days. Nothing happened. Nothing happened. It was really a missed opportunity. The most level-headed, respectful, realistic conversation about what we needed to do with the Dreamers, and it just evaporated.
Yeah, and I think, and just lastly, I think Democrats and I think people will look back, and again, in terms of issue like immigration or any issues that deal with in terms of Hispanics or undocumented immigrants or criminal justice reform, I think Democrats, following, believe it or not, the rally in Charlottesville in August of 2017, it became toxic to stand with him on issues that involved that. Because voters themselves who were in that far left Democratic camp immediately became resentful of the president, and as a result, their elected leaders, their party kind of followed suit on that. And I think, kind of once that happened, any issues that delved into those waters, anything like that, was kind of, you're either with him or against him, and there's no in between. And to me, that's the biggest problem, is that, it's not about whether you agree with him on some issues, if you're willing to compromise. It's, Democrats in 2020 in the primary are going to be running, I voted with him 10% of the time as opposed to 20% of the time as opposed to 30% of the time. And that's who's going to get the nomination. It's not going to be a debate over whether you compromise or not, or whether you legislate or not.
Right.
It's going to be how much were you willing to vote with that guy? And to me, that's going to be the ultimate deciding factor. There is not going to be one Democrat that's thinking about running for president that's going to compromise with this guy over the next 18 months.
Totally agree. That or in a long shot, Mike Bloomberg. I think we have 1 minute left. If anyone has anything really intelligent to say. Liz, any final thoughts on Matthew?
I just wanted to get back to that Popeye the deep fried turkey. And
do you know, Matthew, that Popeyes now makes a deep fried turkey for Thanksgiving? You can order it in advance. I heard it was around $30 or $29. That may not be accurate. But they make a deep fried turkey, and Popeyes is really fantastic. I think maybe next year we're in. To heck with tradition.
Why wait a year? Do they do it for Christmas? Why wait a year?
That's right.
Yeah, exactly. Oh my gosh.
Exactly. Anyway, Matthew Fell, thank you so much for joining us again and for being on Immediate Release. You were absolutely brilliant, and I got to say your take on the elections was jaw dropping. You really hit it on the nose.
You did. We went back and listened, and you got them all right. I think you had one little slip. The rest of it you nailed.
You really nailed it.
Those numbers.
No,
right to Vegas.
Thank you for literally right to Vegas. So thank you guys for having me. And then I guess when Amy Klobuchar is the Democratic nominee in 2020, I can put some money on that or something like that.
Exactly. We'll be doing online betting by then. So, all right. Thank you everybody for listening. Really appreciate you tuning in again.
Thanks, Matthew.
Thanks all. Bye.
A purple mountain majesties.